So parts of Africa and Asia are at risk of losing crops. They're facing food insecurity for the rest of the year because of locust swarms. We've covered this story before. It doesn't look like the locusts have gone away. Countries that have been battling the plague since last year, but usually weather means that the problem goes away. Well, this time it's not going away. Kenya is experiencing its worst infestation in 70 years, while in India, locusts are threatening the livelihoods in areas already battered by coronavirus lockdowns. Authorities in these and other affected countries are now scrambling to coordinate their responses, but weather conditions, along with political instability, are hampering efforts. So Debora Patta has been following this story since we first started, bringing it to your attention. Debora, you are in Johannesburg, so can we talk about this? Because sometimes, when we're not talking about a story, we sort of assume that it's kind of wrapped up. I sort of assumed that locusts would kind of ebb and flow with nature and that the swarms would sort of die off on their own. What's happening? There's still a problem.
It's a very important question, Anne-Marie. There is indeed still a problem. And if you remember when we spoke at the beginning of the year about the locust invasions then, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations warned that if these locust invasions were not contained, they could increase in size 500-fold. And it was really hoped that the drier weather around now in June would see the end of these locust invasions, but that has not happened. Instead, we've once again in parts of Africa and elsewhere have had unusually heavy rains. Locusts like to breed in moist conditions, and so we've seen several new generations of these locusts having breeding sites during this period, and they've now multiplied and caused devastation in parts of Africa, as you mentioned, in Asia and in the Middle East. And for Kenya, this is their worst locust infestation in 70 years, in quarter of a century for Ethiopia and Somalia. They are destroying crops in Uganda, in India, and Pakistan. And I want you to imagine what these locust swarms look like. One was recorded as having up to 200 billion of these creatures. It occupied a space in the sky that was 3 times the space that would be over a place like New York City, to give you an idea of how big these are. And they're not just scary insect invasions, they cause serious damage. They move really quickly. They can move up to 90 miles in just one day. And even a small swarm of locusts can consume food that could feed, say, around 35,000 people. So that gives you an idea of how bad this problem is, Anne-Marie.
Wow, those are harrowing figures, Debora. So what's being done in the countries? What can be done to combat the infestations?
Well, it's a serious problem. One of the things that is done is aerial spraying. But the big worry is that this devastation is going to cause food insecurity. And in fact, the International Rescue Committee is warning that perhaps nearly 5 million people already face starvation, and that if this is left unchecked, it will only get worse, and that we could see a famine of the likes that we've never actually seen before. We've had aerial spraying over May. There was a bit of a break during the COVID pandemic that's sweeping the world. But in places like Kenya, there have been significant gains. They've rescued about 720,000 tons of food, but it's still not enough. They need to do a lot more. And there is one factor that cannot be controlled, and that factor is the weather. There have been unseasonal heavy rains in places like Yemen, where the locust invasions first began. Normally a heavy rainfall would be a very rare occurrence. Now they're happening regularly, almost every month. And think about Yemen. That's a place where there is an ongoing civil war. It has not stopped throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. Then on top of that, they had the coronavirus pandemic. They already have a food security problem. 4 out of every 5 people, says the UN, is hanging on by a thread in that country, in need of desperate life-saving aid. And then on top of it, you get this locust infestation, which is now spreading across Africa and the Middle East and parts of Asia because of this unpredictable weather. They, in fact, predict that these invasions could continue until the end of the year.
unbelievable, and your heart just breaks for the people that are suffering because of this infestation. Debora Patta, thank you so much for your reporting. We really appreciate it.